Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Telemedicine Talks. We have Phoebe Gutierrez, our awesome host. This is Leah Damasco, the co host. And we have a great guest today. We have Ashlyn Smith. She's a board certified PA and distinguished fellow of the American Academy of PAs and certified diabetes prevention program lifestyle coach with 14 years of clinical expertise and over a decade of commitment to medical education. Also, she's owner, educator, and clinician at Elm, Endocrinology and Lifestyle Medicine. We're going to talk about that more. And she is also the past president of the American Society of Endocrine Physician Assistants and lectures regularly on pituitary disorders at Creighton University's PA program. So we have a heavy hitter. So awesome that you're gracing us with your presence. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you and talk about something that I'm really passionate about too. I think we have some good shared interests. So I'm excited to get started.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we didn't warn you about this, but we started asking this question to all the guests in the very beginning. So doing what you're doing now, what did you want to be when you grew up? Is this where you saw yourself, growing up at pre-K? Hey, this is going to be me. Or what did you want to be back in the days?
It was pretty much a tie when I was very young. I either wanted to be a veterinarian or I wanted to be a dancer. And it turns out I'm not really cut out to be a dancer, just kind of casually. So that dream ended relatively quickly. And then surprisingly, I did some shadowing in the vet clinic and I just couldn't do it. But humans, I'm fine with working with humans. I can talk to humans and explain to them what's going on. So that just suited me a lot better. So not a vet, not a
No.
dancer, ended up being a PA.
Awesome. Awesome. And tell us about your journey, where you went, where you came from, and how you got where you are and the passions that kind of led you there.
So it's been a journey for sure. I realized pretty early on that I loved endocrinology, so hormone health and how complex it was. It was somehow still really beautiful. And I was excited about partnering with patients on that journey. So I actually had a surgeon ask me once, why wouldn't you just want to fix people and then send them on their way? But I thought really being able to partner with somebody over the long haul and like sharing that journey with them and find what motivates them and what's really important to them. So I love that idea of chronic disease management that endocrinology brings. And I started in practice about 14 years ago, initially as the insulin pump person at an internal medicine office. I was replacing a PA that they had there who was doing that job. And the physicians there were very nervous about doing any diabetes technology. It was still really young back then. And I was able to step into that role and just absolutely loved it. And I did a little bit of dabbling in pediatric endocrinology, but really settled into adult endocrinology for about the past decade, working in the adult endo space. And then, of course, when COVID happened, it changed to a good chunk of telehealth. Once we saw how that worked, I think it's here to stay. And so my practice transitioned, even after all the restrictions, it's transitioned to a predominantly telehealth practice, which has some great advantages that we can talk about.
No, that's amazing. And more power to you. I'm an ER doctor, I'm a pediatrician, and I'll be honest, it's like your surgeon friend. I stayed away from endocrinology. I just couldn't get those pathways, and in chronic care, I was like, "Oh, just treat him and treat him." But that's amazing. So tell us how, and it seemed like COVID was kinda the crux, right? Well, it kinda just transitioned, and a lot of telemedicine is like that, right? It's pre-COVID, post-COVID telemedicine. What did you see the change? How did it change for you, and what possibilities did you see after going through that, I wanna say era, 2, 3 years, it's almost like 2, 3 lost years, but yeah, that era there.
Well, I think it had some surprising impact on patient care, especially when we're talking about that chronic medical management model. One of the things is that we're really meeting the patients wherever they're at. So they could be at home, they could be in a grocery store, they could really be anywhere. And I have found some really cool advantages to that. Like if somebody is not sure what medication they take or do they have biotin in their multivitamin or all these different things, I can actually have them they're at their home. I can have them go check on that, or I can see what kind of environment they're in and really help kind of meet them wherever they are. And I think it allows you to share some deeper insight into how patients are living. And then I love the little pop in by the loved ones. A daughter pops into frame where the wife says, "Hey, that's not exactly right," or gives some sort of feedback. So it's just a different environment. And when I was practicing in person, especially in Arizona, there are such care deserts for specialty care. People would travel for hours just to have their 15-minute appointment, and then they'd have to book a hotel, and it was a whole thing. So by actually utilizing telehealth, you're able to really reach that audience and you have fewer missed appointments. And that helps with treatment progress by offering telehealth. So when I was thinking about what I was going to do for my clinic, that just made the most sense to make it a telehealth clinic. Obviously, from a startup cost standpoint, there's an advantage there, but really just having lived the experience where I saw the advantage to helping people take care of themselves more consistently, get to their appointments more consistently with lower burden. And it's scalable,
Yeah, yeah.
right? The telehealth is significantly more scalable, especially with the PA licensure compact changes that are coming up. So I think it's just so full of opportunities that it's definitely here to stay.
No, that's amazing to hear, and you made a good point. A lot of the arguments right now for those against telemedicine is like, "Hey, it's not brick and mortar. You're not face to face. You don't
Mhm,
develop this rapport or this relationship." But you make a good point where you meet them at their home. You meet them in their natural location where their defenses are down. You get the little family pop-ins, and you could see the greater family interplay and really what this patient is in the entire sense. So I really like that too. No, that's a great point. You are actually the first PA that I've talked to that's focused on telemedicine. We maybe have had another PA, and I have a bunch of PA friends. My initial part of my career was in the military, and the military used a lot of PAs, primarily PAs, not necessarily NPs. And when I went to the telemedicine side, it was mostly NPs. And I've tried to get my PA friends, and some of my best buddies to get into telemedicine, but they haven't gotten the opportunities that the NPs have. But now you mentioned this, and part of it is the licensing, right? It's just the nitpicking
mhm.
licenses. Tell me, you've kind of mentioned this compact. What is that? I've never heard of compact coming in. I'm glad to hear that. What's in the future for this, and how can PAs utilize this so they could dive deep in the telemedicine game?
I totally agree with your comments. There have just been some kind of logistical and legislative battles that the profession has faced. And thankfully, I think we are heading in the right direction. And many of the professions out there have this kind of built in infrastructure for if they do want to go into a entrepreneurship space, they have that support already there, which I'll talk a little bit about that for BAs. And the other is, like you mentioned, with the licensing. The PA license has not had any sort of reciprocal licensure with other states before. And thankfully, there's a lot of work that's going into that. So, APA is working hard at trying to work with the state organizations as well. And last I checked, we were at 19 states within the PA licensure compact. We are making progress with more added as we go along. And the anticipated launch is sometime in 2026 that
Oh,
PA
cool.
licensure compact is going to go live. I don't know when in 2026, but it's already late in 25. So it could be here soon. So I think that really does change the landscape of what PAs are going to be able to do, and it really helps with both marketing them to companies in general, especially telehealth companies that are looking for licenses in
Yeah,
multiple
yeah.
states. And we kind of get kicked out of the running before we even get started. So that can help change the game. And then it does help open a lot of doors for PAs who are thinking about opening their own practice or going into something independent. Which brings me to my next point. That one of the biggest reasons that Phoebe and I got to know each other was as I was starting my journey into PA entrepreneurship. She was at a workshop at AAPA actually talking about this very topic. And we got to chatting about how PAs just do not have that infrastructure like some of the other medical professions have. And it's not that we aren't capable, it's not that we don't have a passion for it, it's really that we don't have that support system. Through Phoebe's passion supporting PAs, I'm working with her through the Independent PA Collective to really help with that. So walking through compliance issues and legislative things and how it varies so much from state to state, depending on where you're practicing, and then compliance and operations, and working through the things they don't teach you in PA school, like marketing yourself. We're
Yeah.
used to just
Yeah.
stepping into a clinic and patients arrive. And this is a very different animal when we have to do things like worry about marketing and SEO optimization and all that.
Yeah, the PA approach is really interesting too, because like Leo, you probably will understand this, but nurses, like you have your nursing board that's like fighting for you. PAs are represented by the medical board, which is the same board that is representing the physician. So it's this very interesting kind of dynamic where, like, let's not give PAs too much independence. Let's not allow them to do certain things because it kind of conflicts with, like, then you have the physicians all pissed off at you. So it's
Yeah.
this really weird battle. And then, like, me as a consumer, I'm like, we don't have enough freaking doctors and we don't have enough providers. And like, oh my gosh, we need more specialty access and we need more specialty care. And we need to stop trying to make it so like competitive and hard. And to Ashlyn's point, like PAs don't have an infrastructure. Nurses do, doctors do, but PAs were kind of missing that whole look like we can band together and actually launch our own clinic. Like you'd be surprised at how many PAs don't even know that that's an option for them because
Mhm.
you don't hear too many success stories.
No, I was just about to say the whole mindset. And I'm just talking about my buddies who, lifelong PAs, and they've been doing a lot of side gigs with and dabbling in telemedicine, but we've been trying to find entrepreneurship kind of opportunities. We've been trying to find opportunities where they could advance themselves like we've seen the NPs do. And it's just, maybe we're looking the wrong places, but it's just been absent. And I think the mindset is also different. And maybe I've interpreted this wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong, but the PAs have always kind of nestled themselves under the physicians, said, "Hey, we are going to support the physician." While the NPs, right now, they've done that too, but there's been a lot of push to go on and practice on their own. And that's not necessarily what the PA's push has been historically. And so I think that kind of mindset has created kind of this space that we see now. It's nice to see branching out because, yeah, we have these healthcare deserts. We have a paucity of providers where, if we had a lot of doctors sitting around twiddling their thumbs, it'd be different, but it's not. We have a lot of patients twiddling their thumbs. Wait times 3 months or longer
Mhm.
if they're lucky.
Yeah, I'm sure this affects other specialties, but especially endocrinology, there is such terrible reimbursement for physicians that a lot of physicians are not going into that specialty. So I think that those care gaps are going to get even bigger
Yeah.
because of the reimbursement. And you are right. So the PA profession was kind of created to be a part of a team based healthcare,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's still what a lot of us focus on. We still focus as treat practice as part of a team. But where I think that has somewhat handicapped us is we didn't have that initial push to be able to stand on our own and have our own scope and rely on our own expertise because we were focused on the kind of that team-based model. And it is changing, at least like here in Arizona, moved from a supervising agreement with a physician to a collaborative practice agreement if you've had at least 8,000 hours of clinical practice. So that it really starts to support that change from, okay, I have a supervisory agreement and I need to follow the scope of whoever I'm working for. So no matter what I've done in the past, I'm limited by their scope. And it shifts it more to having some more of that flexibility of who you can partner with as your collaborative doc. And it allows you to be able to practice under your own experience and your own scope. So I think we are moving the needle. We're just behind the times a little bit. So I think we'll catch up. But the model was really kind of team-based medicine. I mean, it was Naval Corpsman that started our profession. So that's where we started. And I just think that shift is happening a little later than other professions.
Yeah. So you mentioned something, and this probably my lack of knowledge. So the supervisory agreement versus a collaborative agreement, What's the main differences between that, and why is that important to make that distinction?
It is so important. So, a supervisory agreement is pretty restrictive on what you can do. And you basically have to mirror the scope that your physician has. So let's say you've been in family practice and you've seen adults and pediatrics and done the full age range. And then you move to an internal medicine practice. And now they say, well, you can't see children or you can't do anything like that because that's not what my scope is. I don't know that you'd be seeing children at internal medicine anyway. But for the sake of argument, let's say that you would. So you kind of lose the advantage of all this experience that you've had because that's not what the physician's scope is. That has its place. So certainly people that are starting out and do need more of that support and they don't have that benefit of years of experience, then it is very beneficial. It's really helped build that foundation. But collaborative practice is for those who've been practicing for quite a bit longer. And you have to go through, at least in Arizona, you have to go through a whole certification process and get attestations about your hours of clinical practice. And it's very strict. I know Phoebe and I were talking, it took a couple months to get all the paperwork in place. But once that's in place, now, especially working in telemedicine, I can have a collaboration agreement with somebody, maybe somebody who's endocrinology, maybe somebody who's internal medicine, maybe someone who's in gynecology, really anybody, as long as we're both comfortable with that. We do still have to have, I believe it's about an hour of interaction time a month. So there is still that interaction time, but it's not the same as with the supervisory agreement. You don't have that, the detail, like chart reviews and signing off on all of that more day-to-day minutia, because once you've practiced for so long, there's that understanding your experience. So it's very different. And I would encourage Ps that have practiced for a while, if that's an option within your state, look into what that would take to get that certification. Because for me, I actually held off on certain parts of launching my business until I got that certification because it just opens so many more doors. So I think it's a game changer.
Now, with a compact, is there talk that, let's say you do qualify for a collaborating, like, I guess, status in one state? Is that going to be part of the compact, or are you going to have to go each state that you're part of the compact and qualify?
Still each state. It's not gonna be
Ugh,
that easy,
wishful
Leo. But
thinking, right?
well, I
That
do
would
think
make more sense. But why would we
yeah.
do things that would make no
I'm
sense?
No, no, we're
simplifying.
not gonna make anything easy. And the collaborating rules and the supervising rules will still vary, even though you can qualify for the compact. I think the interesting thing is, I don't want to say micromanaged, but it is like a interesting, like where PAs are micromanaged closer. It's almost like they have to be like directly supervised. Like a PA in Pennsylvania that wants to practice independently has to work on site with their supervising or their collaborating physician for 6 months before they can get granted independent to even just practice virtually. Which I mean, unless you're working with the person in the hospital today, like that's never going to work. And so there's a lot of states that are just not necessarily caught up with the times of virtual health and telemedicine that I think it'll be a slower ramp, but I am hopeful that there's a lot of legislation that is kind of mimicking what NPs have today.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, to Ashlyn's point, like, Ashlyn could totally practice independently, and I probably trust her. I would trust her with my hormones more than I would trust you, Leo.
I would too, for God's sakes.
I hope
Don't trust me to
so.
suture anybody, though. I promise. You don't want that.
No, and I'll be honest. So when I was a baby doctor, it was the PAs that taught me. The two friends I talk about all the time. My first duty station as a military doctor, it was a PA that took me under his wing, and it was like, just follow me for a month, and I'll teach you all that you need to know. And I did. And we're still friends now. Thanks, really. But to the point is, like, yes, there are very highly qualified folks. And this is no knock on anybody, but sometimes I've had PAs that I went to ER residency with. I will definitely trust them with my life more than, some of the ER doctors that I know. Yeah. So tell us more about, you've alluded to it, but tell us more about your entrepreneurship kind of pathway and being a PA, right? We've talked about this kind of a new pathway ahead. What have you seen as roadblocks and as hardships that you've seen specifically because you're a PA and not necessarily an NP or physician per se?
So my entrepreneurial journey, I didn't realize it, but it actually started years ago when I started doing medical education work on the side. So on top of a full-time job, I just happened to add these med ed pieces. And through that, building a lot of those relationships and doing more of that 1099 work. And I learned a couple of things. One is read every single contract that you are given. I think we're all used to that. Just scroll to the end of the terms and conditions at the end of the agreement, click I agree. But no, when it comes to your profession, definitely read those contracts. And then for me, the journey into full entrepreneurship was a little bit earlier this year. And I was really feeling that tension between wanting both a work life balance for
Yes.
myself and feeling like I was pouring so much energy into what others prioritized and still somehow not being able to give as comprehensive care as I felt that people needed, especially within endocrinology. There's a space between when you tell somebody that their labs are normal, even if it's been a long journey, to get there, a space between that and I feel okay. There's this space where you could say, I still don't feel right though. And it was pretty early on in my profession where I would notice kind of the shoulders drop and just go almost like this
Yeah.
disappointed look that things were normal. And what I found is that really not letting that be the end of the conversation, right? Take a more whole health approach. Look at some of those lifestyle factors that may be at play. Look at other things. Maybe we're talking about sleep apnea or depression or chronic pain or something else that might be influencing how they feel. And continuing on with that and say, yes, these labs are normal. Let's talk about what else might be going on. And I have found how important that work is. That's when I chose to go into entrepreneurship. I wanted to make sure that those were the two pillars of my practice. We both did evidence based medicine and make sure we do endocrinology the right way, but also fold in evidence based lifestyle medicine, not just kind of whatever makes you feel better, but actual evidence based medicine and make those as foundational to the clinic. And I will say right off the bat, one of the hardest things is just fear,
Right.
not knowing, should I do this? I'm the primary breadwinner in my family. What happens if it doesn't work? And where do I start? That was one of the hardest things is just understanding who to ask first, where to look first. So I'm really grateful that I didn't even know about the workshop at APA until like a day before. And I decided to take that leap. That's really changed the trajectory of my professional career. And I think that I learned really early on there are odd little nuances to PA practice that I didn't really know existed. Like I didn't realize the collaborative practice certification existed until I started looking into this. And then the state by state rules are very different depending on where you're practicing. And that makes it really confusing. And I remember I even reached out to the Arizona Regulatory Board of PAs and I was like, just so I'm clear, are these the specific rules about PAs owning a clinic? And there was some legalese response. It was like, all the information can be found at blah, 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 blah. And I had to kind of go look at it myself. So I remember reaching out to people and saying, am I reading this
Right.
right? Is this what this means? So trying to figure out what your state's rules are as a PA. Can PAs even own their own practice? Because some states that's yes, and some states that's no. Some states kind of,
You don't know about that
and
at all, though,
then
Leo. You don't know about
No, no,
owning
it's all
clinic.
been straightforward. Yeah, having experience with going through the boards, it's just like that, right? It's like, well, we think it's a great idea, but oh, wait, no, it's not. Or it's very gray. There is not a black and white answer. We come from a profession that appreciates black and white answers. So we have a very hard time trying to navigate. Yeah, I think any profession has a very hard time navigating the answers that we're given, but you're right, it's just never a straightforward answer.
So I'm lucky in that Arizona is pretty flexible for PAs. So PAs can own their own practice. There's, of course, community medical practice rules that we have to follow. So, how much
Yep.
ownership in terms of kind of the ethical, medical, legal type of the picture. So, where I can pick my name of my clinic, I can pick the specialty focus, I can pick what patients I except in what hours I work and that sort of thing. But in terms of that community medical practice, there is still that 51% physician.
Yeah, talking about
That
CPOM laws that also differ from state to state, right? Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's important to really do your research, ask the experts, really find out what your state's rules are even before you start creating the business. Because from moment one, there could be rules in place. And I know Phoebe could probably talk about this a lot more thoroughly than I can because it's very confusing.
Yeah, no, I think we could dedicate a whole week of one of these podcasts just to go through. And yeah,
I think before this, Ashlyn, I had to sit and explain a contract fully for an hour.
we were talking about that. She was like, "Do you want to go through the contract?" And I was like, "Yeah, we'll go through the contract."
Let's go
But
through
yeah,
it,
let's go do
man.
it.
Let's go through it. No,
But
it's a complicated process. I think it's very overwhelming, but I think if there's one thing, like it's not impossible. And I think it's intimidating by design, unfortunately.
But I will say that it is a lot of work. But it's a different kind of work when you're pouring your energy into something that you're passionate about and that you know it's for a good reason. And for me, I know it's serving my family and my work life balance. So there is kind of that, I want to say for me, there's kind of that renewed energy and passion in the professional work because of the focus and I'm being able to create something that's really meaningful that I can be really proud of. So it is hard work, but in my mind, it's worth the work and it's worth the wait.
isn't it amazing once you step out of the clinical monkey role and
Mhm.
doing something that you actually love and really that's yours, right? And in this, I think as professionals, providers, we've given up that in the brick and mortar space. So it's awesome to see yourself, others getting into that space and getting really excited. But how scary was it for you stepping out of that role? How many classes did you have in PA school that taught you how to do this, how to talk business, how to set up a business, and how to rely on
Mhm.
your business acumen and do that? Yeah,
0.
exactly. Exactly. Less than a handful,
Yeah,
right?
there definitely were no classes in PA school about even contract reading, so definitely not about building a business. I have a couple of unique advantages that I'm so grateful for. One of them is that I come from a family of entrepreneurs, so I've kind of grown up seeing my parents walk that path and understanding that there will be highs and lows, and it's kind of part of the process, and just kind of learning from their business acumen. So while I was thinking about this, I definitely spent some good time talking with them as well. Just they're not in medicine, but they are business owners and successful business owners. And then also had the advantage of having a decade of medical education experience that I was able to kind of when we were looking as a family at the situation, I could really rely on that and dive full time into entrepreneurship, which I think is really helpful because I'm able to make more progress, but it's still terrifying. And there are still moments as you're going through everything, especially as you're growing or you're having to make a pivot that you didn't expect, that, imposter syndrome is real. That idea that who's going to want to listen to me? I'm just this random PA in Arizona. Why would anybody want to come to my clinic? And I have other aspects of the business that are supporting primary care clinicians through e-consultations and educational resources and EHR templates and webinars and that sort of thing. And even as I'm putting those together, I'm like, gosh, is anybody gonna really want this? But those are the questions that I get asked all the time. I get asked that as I'm doing med ed and as I'm just living my life as a PA, I get asked those types of questions like, not just how do I manage X and Y condition, but how do I work through the prior authorization process? So, kind of things that have worked for me. And then, really answering those pressing questions. But it's hard because we, at like most clinicians, PAs are kind of trained that you just get the medicine right and you walk into a clinic and it's all set.
Yeah.
The credentialing for insurance is set up, the patient panel is there, someone's doing your scheduling, the marketing's already been done, it's already set up. So learning things like how to build a website and how to do marketing and just all of that and having to do the back end work there's not been any structure to put that into place for PAs. So a lot of learning on the job. And I think a lot of it is also being flexible, really looking for feedback from those in healthcare, but also just in legislation and compliance and those industries as well, but also listening to your customers, getting that honest feedback. And I think it's important to get that honest feedback and then listen to it because it can be really challenging when you've created your baby, but then there's some negative feedback, but that will help shape it to be even better in the future.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And let's talk about Elm. Let's talk about specifically what you've built and tell us a little bit more about that, what you do, and how people could reach out if they need your services.
Yeah. So Elm is my baby. Elm Endocrinology and Lifestyle Medicine, really pairing that hormone health with evidence-based lifestyle medicine. So there's actually even a certification for that, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and they have some really robust evidence-based courses and materials for that. So it really put a name to what I was trying to pair with endocrinology from the beginning. So it's a telehealth-based clinic spanning at this point all of Arizona. We'll see how that changes as time goes on and as the compact comes into place. But really, anybody within Arizona who's looking for that hormone support can come to Elm. There are a few different things. There's health coaching. Very soon, there will be medical care as well. Also, blogs and information just in terms of medical conditions and kind of explaining that complex world of endocrinology in plain patient language. I've also developed some health screeners that you can use to kind of see, am I at risk for X, Y, and Z? So we have kind of two arms, right? We have the patient focused arm, which is what I've been describing so far, but there's also the clinician facing services. So that spans anything from those resources that I was mentioning. So the most recent one that I made was crafting your EHR templates to double as your prior authorization for obesity medications. That's one of the big questions that I get is how do I get this approved? And it takes so much time and so much effort. And what I've learned just from practice is that there are certain phrases that you want to make sure are included in that. And then when your staff knows, or if you're doing it yourself, but if your staff knows, then they just pull that right from your note and they have it all kind of prepared. So it helps facilitate workflow, but it also decreases some of that administrative burden,
Yeah.
which ultimately improves access to these medications, right? If we're able to streamline that prior authorization process. And then quick references for things like continuous glucose monitoring, billing, and workflow processes, as well as e-consultations. So submitting a case, maybe it's a new endocrinopathy that you're looking at, or maybe it's just a complex case. You want to get some of that specialty expertise without fully sending a patient over for a referral. So that's a really cool way to have more of that collaboration between primary care and specialty. And it helps bolster that endocrine expertise within the primary care space too. So ultimately, that's expanding access, which is really great. And then straightforward professional coaching too. If you just say, hey, I don't have a specific case, but I want to learn more about diabetes management or about osteoporosis or thyroid management, that is another option too, because that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years is teaching people about endocrinology. So I think those two missions go hand in hand, providing that quality care to patients, but also equipping other clinicians to do the same thing. Again, showing that collaborative model. Medicine is a team-based sport. So we are in this together. And I think when we all work together to share our strength, then that helps all of us grow.
No, absolutely. I agree. Yes, you have to be in Arizona to do the clinical practice part. But does the clinician facing and the patient education part, does that have to be limited in Arizona? Or can you have clients outside of the state since you're not necessarily offering direct care?
That is such a good point. And thank you for bringing that up because you're absolutely right. When it comes to medical care, so when you're actually diagnosing
Mhm.
somebody, you're running tests, you're prescribing, that sort of thing, that has to be where your license is, which for me right now is all of Arizona. But when it comes to health coaching for patients, when it comes to e-consultations, when it comes to professional coaching, that is not limited by your state. That's really anywhere nationwide if there was somebody who needs support. For instance, I just saw somebody that was in Denver. So I'm not providing medical
Yeah.
care to that person, but I was able to do some really foundational education and help kind of walk through some of the options, pros versus cons, and what some next steps might be. And then, really equipping that person with having a more thorough look at his options for his care plan and risk versus benefit. So, yes, that is not limited by your state, but your medical care is limited to where your license is.
Yeah. No, and I think that's an important distinction, right? Because then, making that distinction, understanding that full distinction increases your reach and it's able to increase kind of who you're able to, sway. So I think that's huge. So no, thank you for making that distinction there. Phoebe, do you have any other questions? We are closing out. Any other questions that you have or
No, just Ashlyn's been working her butt off to get Elm up and running, and she is just a phenomenal clinician, and she cares. And I'm super passionate about just like hormone health and, kind of all these things where I think all the listeners probably know, like I constantly am trying to advocate from like the patient perspective. And like Ashlyn is just the provider I think we all would want. So anybody needs any sort of care or just wants to be educated, she's an amazing resource.
now, and how do they get in contact with you?
So my website is elm-health.com. So elm-health.com. And then Instagram is another one. I'm really active on Instagram with educational content and such. So elm.pac. And then, of course, you can always just reach out and email me, my elmhealth@gmail.com. And one other thing that I'll give a little plug, if you're not sure, maybe you're a patient and thinking, I'm not sure if this is a good fit for me, I'm offering those free initial health consultations. So that first, 15 minutes, get to know me. Let's chat. See if it feels like a good fit. Similarly, if you're a clinician and if you're like, yeah, I really would like to learn more about endo, but I'm not sure how that might look, or maybe you have an idea for a service that I haven't mentioned, let's chat. Book a discovery call with me and we'll just chat about it. No obligation at all. We'll just chat about what you have in mind or how I might be able to support you. So, like I mentioned, it may look one way right now, but as needs change and people give that feedback, right? They say, hey, it would be really helpful to have this. Definitely open to pivoting and folding in other services with ultimately the goal to empower patients and empower clinicians and have better health outcomes.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing. And looking forward, hopefully getting you back on the show and seeing how this pans out and give us your success stories a little later down the line. Because no, this has been a great talk. And especially after the compact hits. And I'd like to see more PAs getting in the telemedicine game. And, as you learn, maybe you could help those looking into it, follow
Mhm.
your lead.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be a game changer. So I think a follow up after that's in place. And just like with anything medically focused, similarly professionally, if I learn something, I just want to give it back to other people. So I'm happy to share what I've learned professionally as well along the way. And if it helps another PA maybe take that leap, then I will have served a great purpose.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Yeah, we'll post along your contacts and your socials, but we appreciate your time. And again, looking forward to catching up in the near future. So thank you, folks. And if you have any questions, concerns, you could definitely email us at Phoebe@telemedicinetalks.com, Leo@telemedicinetalks.com, and info@telemedicinetalks.com. Until next time, aloha and thank you all.
Thank you guys.